So first I'm going to start off with my research process. Some things that I've learned throughout my research process is that elaborating and comparing and contrasting primary resources and secondary sources is a must. Not every secondary source is credible. Primary research, such as going out to do your own research, is 100% better than relying on someone else's, aka secondary sources. Let's start with primary research versus secondary sources. Before learning my new process, I dealt with my sources very differently. I found a source, copied the info, and just pasted in my papers. Then, without a care, I would give the authors credit. In English 1301 and 1302, it became more complicated than copy and paste. In these courses, I was taught to care about my writing and to help my writing grow until it turned into a wonderful essay. I learned a lot about my secondary sources, which is a topic I will touch on more later, and what is good or bad about my secondary sources. Why it's okay to lean on them just a little, but yet it's even better to go out and work on your own primary research yourself. Instead of carrying all the research papers' weight on whatever one of my sources had to say, I went out myself and looked for raw answers from real people. For example, instead of relying on my secondary sources to tell me about PETA's campaigns and how they affect the public or animals, I went out and spoke to real-life animal advocates. The information I collected benefited my paper tremendously, way more than an article itself would have. Another thing I've learned, and I will elaborate on, is comparing and contrasting my primary and secondary sources. When I went out to conduct my own research, I met with different people with different knowledge over my topic. Having conducted this research with like people made the paper seem more real than if it was based on secondary sources. In a secondary source, an article would say that a large group of people would be happy over what PETA was doing and what they're about. Sometimes what us as writers don't realize and understand is that when we're looking into other people's work, we don't analyze the details. We don't see whether the statement is true or false. How could we know if the public was really happy about PETA? Did this author go out and ask a group of people themselves? Was there focus group work? Was there surveys? If they did, where's the proof? What if this person is being biased and made up the whole group? Once I found my secondary sources, I find their faults and conduct my own research. My job as a research writer is to find proof myself and educate my audience and let them know what they can do to help or improve depending on the topic. In my research process, I basically learned more on my secondary sources and my primary research and comparing them both and contrasting them. I learned the differences and how much damage secondary sources can do and what I can benefit from my primary sources. As I said before, I would rely on my secondary sources the most and base my whole reports and essays over them. Now I take it upon myself and take action and go out to look for my own information from real people that I know is real and will benefit my paper even more. The way I can use this later on is it would definitely get me a better grade if I do it myself instead of looking into other people's articles and other people's work and just copy and paste. It would make it so much better to prove my own point myself with other people's opinions and experiments that I came up with. Integrating secondary sources and writing with authority. Some things I've learned about this is secondary sources are not meant to be the backbone of all your research and your paper. They're there for support only. Not everything that comes in your way is useful. So before learning how to properly use secondary sources, I used them differently. Whenever I had to do a research paper, which was rare and isn't taught enough in high school, I went onto the internet and looked up whatever I could find on my topic. I wrote notes from each article and gathered enough correct and incorrect info to make up a paper. I guess you could say it was a lazy strategy, but I grew out of it already. What I have come to realize is that I used to only look up articles that would agree with my topic and my statement and my propositions. So basically, when I had to do a research paper or an essay, I would only look at the sources that proved my paper right. And let's say I had an article that would say otherwise, I wouldn't use that to the best of its ability in my paper. I would just use the regular article that would support mine. Another thing I realized is not everything online is real. Most blogs and articles are outdated and biased even. Not all could provide truthful information and research for my paper. It isn't very common to find a secondary source that is 100% useful, but most have good ideas and provide info that can be used. Now, instead of using every source online in magazines or in any other way, I'm pickier with my sources. I take my time going through them and even learned a new technique that helped me figure out if these secondary sources were worthy and good enough to use in my writing. This technique is called the crap sheet. The crap sheet has been made up to help a writer filter the bad and good of a secondary source. Here I have an example of one of mine. So this is one of my crap sheets for one of my secondary sources. It talks about the date, if it's been updated, if it's functional. And it even talks about whether it's useful for the audience, the information is appropriate, if the sources and the links are functional and all that. Also, another important thing about secondary sources is that you need to be able to contact the actual author or publisher. If you're not able to, well then maybe there's questions you had about the source and you're not able to contact them. What can you do? It's not a good source. And yeah, here it is. Here are all the questions, the purposes, the accuracy of it, the authority, the relevance, and the currency. After filling out the crap sheets, I would go back and reread my answers, and sometimes my notes. Then I would decide whether this source is literally crap or if it's actually useful for my paper. These crap sheets help me become more aware of the information I use from these sources and how true they can be. I've also become so much more pickier, and I'm very happy that I learned to become confident in my writing. I now know what I can and what I want to include in my essays and what I don't. This is what I've learned about my secondary sources, which is a big part of my writing process. It's probably one of the biggest things I've learned and one of the main things I got out of these courses. Writing with a purpose. Some things I've learned. You have to write about an issue you truly care about, something you want to see a change in. Write about how you can make a change. Before, many writers would struggle with the actual purpose of their writing. What I have come to learn is that in order not to bore yourself or half-ass a paper and its research, you must pick an issue you truly care about. Before I wrote what I was assigned Before I wrote what I was assigned and I wrote ugly. I never cared about the topic and I never paid attention to what or how it could potentially affect anyone. Now I've learned to be more involved and invested into the community. I've learned to go out and look into the issues that are spreading and that my writing could potentially help change. Writing about a topic you care about helps you become more aware of issues and the changes that need to be made. As a writer, you can take it upon yourself to go beyond and look for research on the issue. You find different sources, different connections to improve your topic, your research, and in your writing. Other than finding a topic I care about, I've learned to be more open in my writing, even when I don't have the option to pick my own topic. Whatever the topic could be that a professor or anyone else assigned, I know that there is a reason why it was assigned. I know that depending on my writing, views could be changed, decisions could be made, research would be conducted differently. Maybe even there would be new topics I would encounter. Writing with a purpose is such a broad topic, and I have come to my own conclusion that it is just depends on the writer. I, for one, learned to just be more open-minded and more observant on the topics I choose. To me, to write with a purpose is to write with care and excitement. Every topic that is given for a reason, as I said before. But every issue can be resolved, and that's what I learned from writing with a purpose. Before learning how to write with a purpose, I never really cared about my topics, and I would literally just look up whatever on the internet and just put it in my papers. But now I have learned to be more open-minded, and I do look into the topic. Like, for example, medicine, which is what I'm most interested in. These topics affect the community because it affects families and it affects the people's health. If a disease can be cured, if you can look into it and do your own research, you could help find a cure for a certain disease. The way I can use this later on is maybe whatever topic I can write on later on, maybe it can be done. Like, you never know if you could find a solution to the topic and to your issue by finding out your own research yourself. You never know.